85% of Germans have liability insurance, yet most people who move here don't even know what it is. And that's a real issue, because in Germany, when you break somebody else's things or accidentally hurt them, you're liable for all of the financial repercussions, even if that's in the millions. In today's video, I'll tell you everything you need to know about liability insurance, including what it is, what it covers, what it doesn't cover, how much it costs, and as well a few tips on how to make sure that your claims process goes as smooth as possible. But first, if you're new here, hi, my name is Théo. I work at Feather. Feather is an English-first digital insurance company. We help people who have moved abroad figure out their insurance need. And on this channel, we break down insurance questions and topics, as well as other bureaucracy and admin processes to make sure that you have the confidence and information to live abroad anywhere. And if you like this video, feel free to like, drop a comment, or subscribe. Let's start at the beginning. What is liability insurance? Liability insurance is a type of insurance policy that will pay whenever you accidentally hurt someone or break your things. It's kind of like having a financial bodyguard for your own mistakes. You might be wondering, do you really need liability insurance here in Germany? Well, I would argue that yes, you really do need liability insurance, even if it's not legally required. Just to give you an idea, as I said in the beginning, 85% of Germans have liability insurance, and for good reason. There is no limit to how much you can owe someone if you accidentally hurt them or damage their belongings. That means, in practice, that one small mistake can cost you thousands, if not millions of euros. Furthermore, there are many instances where you're expected to have liability insurance, and it may be detrimental to the desired outcome if you don't have it. For example, if you're looking to rent an apartment and you submit a rental request to a potential landlord without proof of liability insurance, your landlord will definitely look twice at your application before accepting it. This landlord has a real incentive to prioritize someone who has liability insurance versus someone who doesn't. This is because if you have liability insurance, you're much more likely to be able to pay for damages that you caused to their property. All right, now you know why you might want to get liability insurance. Let's talk about what it actually covers. So at Feather, we like to think about liability insurance coverage in three main categories I've boringly named the big three. First in the big three is property damage. For example, if you drop somebody's iPhone while you're taking a photo of them and you crack the screen, liability insurance would cover for the repair costs. Second in the big three is bodily injury. If you accidentally hurt someone or they accidentally hurt themselves because of something that you did. For example, you have a backpack in the middle of the cafe and somebody trips over it and break their arms. In this case, liability insurance would cover for the cost of treatment of this third party. The third and final big three category is financial loss. Financial loss is when you either force someone to increase their expenditures or force someone to reduce their potential income. For example, let's say that you leave your tap running in your apartment by accident and it damages your neighbor's apartment too. In this case, your neighbors may be forced to vacate the apartment and to get a hotel for a couple of nights. Your liability insurance policy would cover for those costs. This would be an example of a forced expenditure. When it comes to lost potential income, let's take a previous example of somebody breaking their arm because they trip over the backpack that you left in the middle of the cafe. In this case, if it would mean that they could not be working for the next few weeks, you would be liable to pay for this person's salary and potential lost income. While liability insurance is a wonderful tool for ensuring your mistakes don't cost thousands of euros, it's not a magic tool. There are definitely some limitations, and those might include car accidents. In this case, your car insurance, which is mandatory here, would kick in. Work-related accidents, in this case, it would be your employer's accident insurance that kicks in. Intentional damages are not covered. Neither are damages to your own belongings or to family members. Finally, any contractual penalties or fines, like late fees, would not be covered by liability insurance. Ideally, by now you have a good grasp on liability insurance coverage and you're close to being convinced that it's time to buy a policy. But first, let's talk about something you definitely don't want to overlook, and that's the amount of coverage, how much liability insurance coverage you need. The quick and dirty answer is that you need between 30 and 60 million euros in coverage. Anything more than that is frankly overkill, while anything less than that leaves you massively exposed. But you might be wondering, why so high? I've never owed 30 to 60 million euros to anyone. And while that's a really good point, keep in mind that liability insurance is a policy that kicks in especially in the worst case scenarios. Say you're in a terrible accident that leaves a third party needing hundreds of hours of therapy, multiple surgeries, and lifetimes worth of treatments. You'll be glad to not have to pay those out of pocket and to have a 30 to 60 million euro coverage limit. But there is good news. In fact, the difference between a 5 million euro in coverage policy and a 50 million euro in coverage policy might be just a couple of euros per month. In my books, that's definitely a worthwhile investment. All right, now that you know what you need, let's talk a little bit about how much you should expect to pay. Generally speaking, anything between 4 to 8 euros a month should be plenty enough. Anything more than that, and I would advise that you look twice as to what you're really buying, because that sounds like you're getting coverage that you might not need. And anything less than that, I would look at the terms and conditions twice, because there might be some piece of coverage that's crucially missing. When shopping around, look for group discounts in case you're buying a policy for both you and your partner, or yourself and your entire family, because it can really bring down the cost per person insured. And if you're now completely convinced you've decided to sign up, that's great news. Generally speaking, depending on who you sign up with, you don't need a lot of information except for a German address, contact details, and payment details. And with most insurers, you can start your coverage as quickly as the next day. And with a bit of luck, you're all signed up. But now the question is, what happens when you need to use your liability insurance? Well, let me give you some tips and best practices to make sure that your claims go as smoothly as possible. There's 4 main steps when it comes to claiming liability insurance. The first is probably the most important, and that's documentation. Make sure that you obtain the third party's contact details, that you take as many photos as humanly possible of the incident, and that you write down exactly how you remember the events unfolding. Step 2 in your liability claims would be to report. This can be relatively easy or extremely complicated depending on who you decide to sign up with. At Feather, it's pretty easy. All you do is log into the app, click your liability insurance, and then select make a claim. From there, you have 2 or 3 steps that you have to follow that are displayed on screen. Once you've submitted your claims, time for step 3, which is a pretty boring one. You have to wait. We do our best to look at claims between 2 to 4 weeks, but depending on the complexity and the responsiveness of third parties, it may take longer. In any case, you can trust that we're on it, and if there's anything that's missing or any news that we want to share with you, we'll be sure to contact you. The 4th and final stage is the resolution stage. It's at this point that you will learn whether or not the incident is covered as part of your policy, and if it is covered, then it's when the third party will be paid directly. That's how claims usually work, but in some cases, life gets messy and things get a little bit more complicated. And for those cases, I have a couple of tips that might help keep you sane. First, never ever pay a third party for damages you may have caused. This is your insurance company's responsibility. They are the one to pay the third party, not you. It's especially important because in some cases, you may pay a third party and then it turns out that in fact you weren't at fault. In this case, your liability insurance company will not reimburse you, and good luck trying to convince the third party to pay back the money that you sent over. The second final tip is to make sure that you keep track of all conversations between you and your insurance company, as well as between you and the third party. You never know when those records might come in handy. Always send over a follow-up after an oral conversation, confirming what you've understood from the conversation and asking them to correct it in case you've got anything wrong. This will make sure that you've got all your legal bases covered. And that's it for your complete guide to liability insurance in Germany. If you've got any questions, please leave them in the comments. Otherwise, you can head to Feather's liability insurance page and sign up in just a couple of minutes. We made it super easy. So thank you very much for listening. Ciao, ciao.